Hello, it's me, Tian, back again with the Durham Student Union, and today we are carrying on with the Let's Talk Leadership series. So today I have guests Catherine and Maddy, and I'm going to ask them a fun icebreaker question first to just loosen the room. So, what is your favourite way to spend a day off?
Do you want to start?
Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I have currently been watching every season of Call the Midwife. That is 14 seasons. I have 1.5 left, and that has taken up the entirety of my free days over the past month, which is very sad, but I'm enjoying it.
Right.
I feel like I really like a productive free day. Like I really enjoy feeling like I've like done something. So I feel like either I'll bake or I'll go for a run or like a walk, and then like I can just rot the rest of the day, and even like I'll like binge a series or something, but it's like that initial like productive task, and then I'll spend like the rest of the day doing nothing.
Great. Those are two definitely broad range of relaxing, which is great. Yeah, I just guess maybe could you tell me a bit about your role in the SU, just for people who don't know?
So I have a full-time officer role, so I'm the education officer. So it's my job to represent the educational side of students' experiences. So that's both representing students to the university as well as within the SU, and just making sure that students can have the best educational experience possible.
Yeah, and then I'm the arts and humanities faculty president, so I'm also working on like the education side, but I'm in a part-time officer role. And so my responsibilities are quite similar to Catherine's, but kind of more specific to arts and humanities. So it's kind of representing that whole student body within the faculty, and just really kind of closing that feedback loop between the administrative side and then kind of feeding back to the students on things that have been acted upon, changes being made, and kind of how their input is being utilized.
Perfect. I feel like I already know a lot more about both those roles. I guess a lot of students right now are going through exam seasons and struggling maybe on academic. What would be your number one tip for if you wish you had when you were back in first year?
I think definitely I do English literature, and so that is a lot of essay writing, and I think a really difficult part of that, especially in first year, is just knowing where you can find sources and the best places to find kind of relevant critical reading rather than just big general Google searches. And I think I found it really helpful on kind of like a lecture slideshow or afterwards where they give kind of like their lecture notes. There's often a bibliography that your lecturer will provide of the sources that they looked at and referenced throughout the lecture. And I think that's really helpful because then you can go and follow up on those sources and read them for yourself and just get a little bit more of a depth of understanding. And I think if your lecturer is using those to teach you, it's often quite a relevant source. And so I think that was something that I found really helpful initially, of just kind of a lot more specific information. So yeah.
Yeah, so one of the subjects that I did was economics, and that did require some in-person exams, which I know the prospect of would be terrifying to everyone that is going to face that next term. So for those exams, I made sure I went through all of the past papers possible because a lot of similar questions do tend to pop up each year. And can only be questions on the set topics that you've studied in the year. So I prepared answers for each of those topics so that I was able to cover every base that could come up in the exam. So then when I opened the exam paper and I saw each question, I was like, great, I've been through these before. I know what I'm doing.
It's really good tips. And I think definitely, I guess big misconception going into uni is there's no more exams. But yeah, you're hit. It depends on the subject though. So yeah, those are both great tips. And moving back onto the theme today about leadership, both of you two hold leadership positions, and we know that you're both also elected. And just like going back in time, do you remember what the campaign process was like for you guys, and what motivated you to go for the roles?
I'll start on that one. So I got involved in sort of student politics and student activism in my first year, a large part just from taking part in UCU pickets, and you would meet a lot of like-minded students there. And I met some very cool people, but they were always quite male dominated spaces, and it could kind of be hard to infiltrate them as a woman. And even within like academic settings, like in a seminar, I was often like talked over or not necessarily treated with the most respect as everyone else, and I wanted that to change. And I've always tried to act when I've seen things happening in the university that I thought have been unfair. Like a couple of years ago when I was helping leading a housing campaign when everyone was queuing up outside all the estate agents. And I had felt like I'd experienced barriers during my degree, so I wanted to become education officer to try and break some of those barriers down. I remember the campaign process was stressful, very, very stressful, but also like equally just a lovely experience as well. Like you meet so many different people when campaigning for a role like this, and I absolutely wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of the campaign team that I'd built up. So it was actually like just quite fun going out leafleting every day and talking to new people. So both stressful and enjoying in equal measures, I'd say.
Yeah, I think my experience is definitely a little bit different to Catherine's because I think it almost happened a little bit more gradually, a little bit more incidentally. I started as a faculty rep in my second year, and I don't think I ever kind of put myself forward for that role thinking I wanted to be a student leader, really involved in student leadership. I just kind of saw it, and after my first year, I was like, yeah, there were some things on my course I would change. There's some things across the faculty that could be improved. So I was like, yeah, why not put myself forward for this? I just thought it'd be something interesting to do. But then I think once I started that, I definitely got a lot more interested kind of in a lot of the university and administrative processes and student representation and kind of how that can be improved as a whole. And so then I think my role as a faculty president is new to the Durham Student Union this year. And so when the roles were first kind of announced and I saw this was a new role, it was a very kind of natural progression from my previous work as a faculty rep, and I knew kind of what I wanted to do if I had more time and resources and a bit more of an expanded role. So I think it was definitely just kind of a gradual, this makes sense, I'm interested in this, and then this also makes sense. So I think I just kind of kept taking those little incremental steps into kind of bigger leadership roles, which I also think felt really kind of supported because it didn't feel like I was kind of diving straight into the deep end. It was kind of, I had a basis of experience to go on. And I think even campaigning, because my role is arts and humanities specific, only arts and humanities students could vote for my role. So I don't think I had that same experience of like campaigning and leafleting everywhere. It was a lot more targeted between kind of faculty buildings like Elvet and really just like putting up posters there, talking to people in my lectures, my seminars, and even students doing combined honors, who then would be going kind of into different departments throughout the faculty and the kind of word of mouth that way. And I think I definitely met a lot of interesting people. I definitely got to know a lot more people kind of on other courses and in other departments within the faculty. But yeah, I think it was definitely just quite interesting in terms of really kind of like targeting that specific group of students within the university.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's like one heck of a journey to get you into the positions that you guys are in, which is amazing. And I'm sure you guys have done a great job. I'm just wondering more about what you touched upon, Catherine, about these spaces being male dominated. Like, what were some of your challenges that you guys faced, like going for these roles or within when you do have the role?
It's definitely been difficult within the role in some of those spaces being felt like I'm being taken seriously. And especially in like the university spaces, feeling like I'm an equal member, because I'm in a lot of university committees and usually I will be the only student representative in those committees. So it's just me and a load of people with hundreds of PhDs that all really seem to know what they're talking about. So that's been quite difficult for me, especially because I'll be usually the only young woman in the room. And it can sometimes feel like I'm being talked down to a bit or treated like I don't know what I'm talking about. So sometimes I have had to remind myself that I did earn my place to be in that room and I do know what I'm talking about. And I think having that realization has made me start having conversations with various members of the university and leaders within the university about how we can make those committees a bit more of a comfortable space for student representatives so it feels less intimidating, especially for a young woman.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. And I think I've definitely had a similar experience in terms of finding yourself sat in a room knowing you're at least 10 to 15 years younger than everybody else. And I think just knowing that there is a bit of a power imbalance, and knowing that these are people sat across from you who are literally like marking your work, who are teaching you, and then you're kind of supposed to be sat across from them giving them advice. I think that can be a really strange feeling, and it definitely took me a little while to kind of become comfortable in that environment, because I think even like a lot of the other people in those rooms aren't always aware of that power imbalance. I think some of them are, but I think sometimes they just aren't cognizant of it or how you're feeling when you're sat there. And I think, but you're so aware of it, you know exactly how you're feeling and you're thinking about it all the time. So I think that also made it quite difficult in terms of just the awareness of the other people and of them not actively bringing you into the conversation or seeking your opinion, and you having to assert yourself to them just because they just aren't aware of how you're feeling when you're sat in that room.
Even like the nicest people in those sort of committees, when I've raised this issue with them, they're always just like, oh yeah, that never really occurred to me, but now that you say that, I can notice that now. But it just doesn't occur to them to think of that, because it's just not something that they're experiencing in there.
Exactly,
Yeah. I think it's difficult, being in the minority, because, you're trying to represent students, but then just being reminded that, like, universities are for students, and, like, everything is, like, the whole aim of all these committees is to improve the student experience. And it's great that we're having you two representing the voices, and just really, like you said, Catherine, having that confidence in yourself as well. And even though there are power imbalances, I think there's definitely, like you both mentioned, like an educational aspect of that awareness that needs to be perhaps used to bridge this power imbalance. But I was wondering, how do you guys see yourself influencing these spaces? So, how the committee can be maybe like old, just like 10-year-old. Not 10-year-old, 10 years older than you. No, that'd be really different if it was 10-year-olds.
A lot easier.
Much easier.
Yeah, how do you influence these spaces? And like, have you found anything that you can say that is proud achievement of yours? Or like, what responsibility did you feel like you had within these student bodies?
I mean, I think for me, a lot of it has been about kind of navigating the right way in which to bring your ideas to these committees, and almost kind of preempting what maybe some of the criticism or pushback might be, so that then how you're presenting yourself and kind of suggesting a change is already kind of navigating those concerns. I mean, literally yesterday we had a faculty education committee for arts and humanities, and I brought an item about kind of having samples of previous work, and there were examples throughout a couple departments in the faculty that have been doing that successfully. But I knew that there would just be certain people who wouldn't immediately embrace that idea, and so I think kind of couching that within a sense of helping students understand marking criteria and pointing to recent kind of like national student survey statistics that really show students struggling in that area, and even what students have been talking to me about, kind of within that broader issue of then this is a potential solution. It's not the only solution, but it's one of the ways in which we could address this issue, rather than just saying, here's a way that we can give students sample work. And I think it's a really great idea, but I think kind of preempting the way in which it's a wider concern we're all facing, it's a possible way forwards, and I just think really kind of influencing the spaces in terms of knowing what they're going to be receptive to ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who does have a greater access to certain members of the university than like your average student, I do somewhat see this role as being a bit of a go-between students and the university to bring their issues to a higher level where it can actually be sorted. But that does also sometimes require having to make some trickier decisions on behalf of the student body, given that sometimes I do have access to different information that students might have, which came up quite a lot when it came to the library opening hours, which was obviously a very horrible decision that has affected a lot of students. And of course, that is something that we wanted to fight. But because of that greater access that we had to the university financial information, we did know that we'd be more effective in sort of the trying to get the alternative provision side of things, as well as fighting cuts on a more broad level, so that we were able to keep the things that matter to students most, instead of just fighting one particular cut, which we knew would be sort of futile because the university had just said time and time again, we're not changing this.
Yeah. I think it's definitely, I think what I got from both of you two is being strategic. Like,
Yeah,
you know, when you
for
come
sure.
into these, know like what you want to get out of it. And it's kind of similar in debate where like you're trying to think of like what are the opposition, what are the people like not the same thinking, and then trying to like come with a solution and a response to that and a stronger argument on our side. And I feel like when it is coming from student voice and you are collecting it from people around you, like that can't really be denied. And I feel like, yeah, just making sure that that student voice isn't neglected. And yeah, I think we're in good hands. I guess in your roles, more about like what was one of the goals you may had when you were like running for these positions? Have you achieved it, or like how has the process been from having a goal to then fulfilling that goal?
It can definitely be quite a long process, which is why it might not always be clear to people that like the student union are doing things all the time to get wins for students. Like a lot of it can be just quite a lengthy process because everything has to get through every single committee to get approved by the top people, and it can just take a while. But one of the main things that I came into this wanting to do was around disability support. And I know how hard it can be for students to be able to get diagnoses, to get the internal adjustments that they need for disability support. And one success I have now had this year after chugging through those processes is that they are moving next year to a process of like a software for screenings for specific learning disabilities, which will mean that students no longer have to pay for the external assessor to get internal adjustments and can just get internal adjustments based on that free screening. So I think that will do quite a lot for students who need those adjustments to do their degree to the best of their ability without having to pay for it.
That's great.
I think one of the things I was really looking at coming into the role, and especially kind of with that arts and humanities focus, was about career opportunities and kind of students within the faculty feeling like they knew what was available to them as potential careers after graduation, as careers resources throughout their degree, and just supported in that sense. Because I think if you're in business, kind of that is a lot more kind of career minded. I think my younger sister, she doesn't go here, but she's in engineering and she'll graduate and she'll be an engineer. But I don't think arts and humanities has that in the same way. And I think that's often a big strength of the degree, but then it's kind of being able to kind of know what you're going to do with that and kind of know how you're going to be best supported through that. So I think students don't always engage with the careers resources we have here, kind of for a mix of reasons, but that being one of them. So this year I've been working really closely with the Arts and Humanities careers team, and earlier in January we hosted an event with a small group of students to kind of have a big sit down and kind of tell the students about all of the careers resources that are open and available to them, and then to get feedback on what ones they knew about, what ones are working really well, did they wish they knew in level 1 versus in level 3, and how can we make sure we're getting that in front of the students at the right time so that they can access it. And I think that was a really, really helpful and productive conversation. I think the students got a lot out of it. I think the careers team also got a lot out of it. And so now we're kind of really going through what the main takeaways were and what the next steps are. And I think we really learned that students knew a lot more about careers events than careers services. And so it's even, we have like an AI tool that helps build a CV, that helps kind of write a cover letter for you, help improve what you already have. And those are so helpful, but very few people knew about them. And so it's kind of putting together just packets of information and knowing who we're going to get those in front of, when we're going to get them in front of them, and kind of to disseminate that information a little bit more clearly. And I think that's been a really productive project that I've been working on this year. And I'm hoping we'll kind of have a big impact for students in years to come, and just that close that little kind of loop between arts and humanities and then job prospects and job opportunities at the end.
Yeah, that's so good. I think there's a big misconception that people have is like if you do an arts and humanities degree, like that's not a proper degree, like, but there's so much transferable skills that you learn from that. There it's like it really doesn't matter what you study, but like how you can talk about it and the skills you learn from that to transfer into a career. And yeah, about like the awareness side, because like I've just come to Durham first year, I realize there's actually so much out there. It's just being communicated that, because we're getting like 10,000 emails every day.
So
And it's
many
just like,
emails.
oh, there's this career opportunity and all this, and you just like, you can miss the news really fast. But like, yeah, that ongoing support, like what is there, like that career page, like that's always going to be there. Whereas like an event, that might be one off. So just making
Yeah, and I think it's because we actually have so much support, and there's so much information that is beneficial, but it's just getting that out and making sure it's being seen at the right time in the right way.
Yeah,
that's great. I think communication is key, definitely.
definitely.
I guess on this thing about career aspirations, and leadership is a key like transferable skill that a lot of companies, organizations look for. What would your advice be for like students thinking, especially young women thinking about going for these positions of leadership? Like, what would your number one advice be? And like, what do you think that are possible challenges that are specific for young women as well, and overcoming that?
I would tell them that they do deserve to take up that space in those leadership roles as much as anyone else. Is particularly as a young woman, there can be very strong feelings of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But you do just have to remind yourself that you earned your place here and you have it in you to take on the roles. I would also say that it is okay to lean on others as well, because I think creating communities of women in leadership roles, which I think we've done quite successfully within our education team in the SU, that that we're able to support each other, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think I was honestly going to say something similar in terms of really asking for help, and kind of even looking at women in positions that you might want to be in one day or that inspire you, and actually just asking them a few questions or for a little bit of their time, because I think anytime I've done that, I've been shocked by how many people say yes. And I think I assume, why would you in this big important position have the time to talk to me? But I think women are so eager and helpful to support younger women get into these roles and get into these places, that actually they're really, really willing to help. And it's, I find, just really supportive conversations. And it also really helps then with that aspect of imposter syndrome and knowing that you do deserve to take up that space, you do deserve to be there. And I think whether or not it's kind of within the role and kind of people who would potentially want to be in our roles talking to us, I know we'd both be more than happy to do that, but kind of within your own team, or even just externally of someone that you're just seeing, you think, wow, that's really cool what you're doing. And then just genuinely asking them for a little bit of time, I find more often than not people say yes. And even if they don't, at least you've asked. Like, I think asking the question is also just really important, because why would you tell yourself they're going to say no before giving them the chance to say no? You lose nothing by it.
Yeah. It's like not saying anything is a guaranteed no.
Exactly.
Like, you just never know. And yeah, like you said, both of you are like, holding such important roles, are willing to help as well. And just creating that collaborative environment. It doesn't have to be a dog-eat-dog world where like we're in on competition. No, we want more women into these spaces. And just using their gifts, because I guess everyone has different skills that they can bring to the table as well. I guess memorable experience now. So just reflecting on your time, what would you say you found most enjoyable about being in your leadership roles?
I mean, for me, the parts that I enjoy the most are when I'm able to actually get out and be involved with students and talk to students about things, because so much of my job in particular, because I'm on the education side of things, is sitting in committees with academics and going through hundreds of pages of papers and making administrative decisions about what we're doing in the university. And I enjoy all of that stuff, and I think it's all incredibly useful and what keeps this university running. But the bits that I've enjoyed the most are when I've actually been able to go out and talk to students. So for me, honestly, one of the best weeks I've had this year in this job was during our election week, when I was able to be on the voting stalls and talk to students about the different candidates and encouraging them to vote. So you do just get to meet a lot of cool people and talk about cool things. So yeah, that's what I've enjoyed the most.
I feel like I really enjoyed probably similarly, but kind of it can feel sometimes like the things you're doing take a lot of time and you have to go through all these really slow administrative processes. And so it can feel like a bit of an uphill battle. And then when you're reporting back to students, it's kind of like, I've taken it to a committee.
Yeah.
I've kind of done this, but there's almost like nothing to show for it that quickly. So I think I've really enjoyed once there is kind of a distinct thing that's happened and it's kind of, I have done this and I've been saying I was doing this, I've been doing it, and now I've done it. And you can kind of go back to those students and say, this has actually been accomplished. It's actually been achieved. And I think then them receiving that and kind of knowing that's a win and feeling good about it and just kind of closing that feedback loop. I mean, it's even really early in this year, I think in October, students in modern languages said that one of their seminars was happening in a room. And it was a language seminar where they had to have a laptop, a textbook, and a notebook. They were happening in a room that only had the chairs with like a little folding desk. So there was no way that they could have enough desk space for everything. And it sounds like just kind of like a small thing of like one class and it's just in one room. Then it's like taking it to a committee saying, this is a problem. They've brought it to this committee. Nothing's been done. So I'm bringing it to this one. And then all these processes happening of, okay, so then who do we have to talk to about getting this moved to a different room? Is it furniture? Is it room space? What actually is the issue? And then months later being able to go back to those students and saying, next year, it will be in a different room. And even though it's kind of next year and we can't get you new desks right away, but it's something is happening. And I think even just those little wins and closing that loop of telling students that the changes they're recommending are being made, I think is quite a good experience.
And yeah, I find it really rewarding to be able to see like the end process. Like sometimes we can, not see it fully through, but like being in these positions of leadership, you can see it from like just being from like a student saying a complaint to it like being implemented for future students. That's great. Moving back onto women in leadership specifically, what do you feel like is one major change that the university can accelerate on to achieve gender equality? So maybe in terms of like closing pay gaps to make sure women and men are paid the same, or other gender inequalities that you find that the university could work more on.
Yeah, I mean, universities are in general very gendered institutions, from things like those pay gaps, particularly between academics, and then also things like gender segregation across different subjects. Like in economics, it was rare to find another woman in a seminar with me. And I do think that those gender norms in universities really do need to be challenged. And I think a starting point for that is actually within curriculums. So I often found that on my course, any question of gender would just be like one lecture stuck on the end, which often wasn't actually assessed. So a lot of people wouldn't actually feel the need to show up to it. Whereas what we need to be doing is actually putting gender analysis and the contributions of women throughout our courses to change how we actually look at gender within universities. I also think one big major change that does need to be made is about how we're combating sexual harassment and sexual assault on campus to make it a lot of a safer space for a lot of women here.
Yeah, I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot because it feels like such a big question, but then also kind of how do you tackle it? And I think especially even coming from just doing a degree in English literature, it's actually a very female-dominated course. So I feel like that's definitely almost skewed my experience a little bit. But I think definitely just making sure these spaces feel open and accepting to everyone and that these are places that you can kind of occupy. And I think it's even things in terms of kind of like having specific like health and well-being support and having period products in bathrooms across the university, making sure that is it not just kind of a bathroom that like a women's bathroom, but a women's bathroom that's actually accessible and supportive and helping and aiding your academic experience. I think it's just such a big challenge and such a big question, but I think it is even just those small little changes. And even like in a seminar, kind of the seminar leader actively making sure everyone feels involved. And if they notice that there's maybe kind of a boy that's speaking over somebody else, inviting them back into that conversation and kind of just making sure all of that is happening, because I think it can be quite easy to overlook, and it's maybe just a little bit implicit in university structures. So just those kind of almost small daily changes, I think, would actually make quite a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I love this. Like, the small wins, the small impacts, the things that we kind of take for granted, like questioning that and trying to overcome that. Like, we don't have to completely radically change the university, but like, these small things, like you said about period products, it has a massive impact for women, because every woman experiences period. Yeah, period products aren't for free. And it's about, like, I feel like so much of it is about breaking barriers. Like, it's not necessarily that the university is going out their way to create gender inequality, but there's like subtle ways where we could just make it more accessible, in the same way about how there's so much support, but making sure that that's being communicated as well. Great. So we're wrapping up to an end in the podcast. So I guess my last question to you guys is, has there been a woman in your life or someone that you admire, past, present, who was you've been inspired by? We'd love to give them a special shout out.
I'll start. I feel like it's such an obvious answer, but I was going to say my mom, because my mom is a female entrepreneur and CEO. So I feel like I've seen her in a lot of really challenging positions and just kind of doing a lot of really interesting things. And I think even from her role in business, I've seen her then join a lot of different women's organizations and women presidents organizations. And I think then just the people she's surrounded by and seeing that network of women is so supportive, and kind of everyone really just helping each other out. I think that's just surrounded me in such an interesting environment. And I think, I mean, my mom directly kind of as my mother kind of saying, you can do this, like all of that, just kind of like pastoral support, but then also just seeing what she's been able to do kind of in her career has been kind of like a dual thing of she can do all of this, and then she's also just my mom supporting me through it.
Women that I admire a lot is Heather Wood, who's the secretary of National Women Against Pit Closures. She's from Easington, and she has spent the last 40 years fighting injustice in her communities and beyond. And so she started off supporting communities during the miners' strike, but even after it ended, she's continued to work towards a better world, particularly for women. And even though she's been doing this work for over 40 years now, she's only recently actually started to get the widespread recognition that she deserves. And I met her just over a year ago, and she has always stressed to me the need for young women to take on the fight, once her generation can't anymore. And so I've been very inspired by her ever since.
Oh, that's such a great way to end the podcast, hearing about that. And yeah, just giving a shout out to all the women out there and taking on these leadership roles. And yeah, just thank you two so much for speaking so eloquently about this and just showing that, yeah, you can do it. That's the big message, that she can lead the way. So thank you for listening right to the end, and that's a wrap.